Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Hopefully, something will develop in the future where everything that a person creates or does will be permanently passed down to their heirs. So this would mean that there would be no more H.P. Lovecrafts creating brilliant, no more people like H.P. Lovecraft creating brilliant art and yet still being super poor. Because the good genes of talent would make money. I guess the main thing is to get it started, get the whole thing of the guy makes money because his ancestor made money, and those things are still earning money for him, so he can afford to make the art that he wants. And then his art gets popular, and then that helps pay for his descendants to make good art, and then they make good art that's popular later on after they die, and then that pays for his descendants, and then their descendants make good art that becomes popular after their death, and then that makes money for their descendants, etc. So it's hard to get such a thing started, but once that cycle starts, it can keep on going like that, right? And it's like, you get one descendant to make him a lot of money, and then once he does, if his children can afford to have children, they'll be successful, and then the money will get passed down to their heirs, because people who are talented are not always recognized as being talented during their lifetime, right? This is a big problem, right? Like H.P. Lovecraft, Mozart, I guess Mozart was recognized to a degree, but he was very poor a lot of his life, right? Like he got like donations and stuff of here's this, watch or this jewel or whatever. Like they give him presents, but he didn't really get paid much money. He was actually he didn't make much money. And Tesla, he died penniless. I mean, so many brilliant people are really not compensated the way they should. I mean, fucking look at what's his name, modern day. He created all those hit songs for Disney that have probably made hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars for Disney. All the songs of the Little Mermaid and Aladdin and a few other Disney movies. And more recently, he did the music for Enchanted, that movie that was partially animated with Amy Adams. You know who I'm talking about? I can't remember his name, but that composer of those Disney movies, he's only worth like $10 million. That guy should be worth hundreds of millions for how many hit songs he's made and how huge those hits were. I mean, he's basically like as successful as Taylor Swift or something, and yet he's only worth $10 million. It's totally insane. Totally insane. So this is totally unacceptable. You know what I'm saying? Like, people should be compensated for how talented they are, how great their work becomes, even if it's only after their death, right? And that should benefit their heirs, especially just from, not even from a fairness perspective, but just from a eugenics perspective. You want those heirs to be making that money from his works, because then they'll be able to afford to have more kids, and then those good genes will get passed on more, and then you'll have more brilliant artists in the future. So just from a eugenics standpoint, you got to make sure that copyrights endure and never expire, and then they just pass down to the kids. You know what I'm saying? This is how it should be. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to copy that stuff. You should still be able to copy it to a degree, but you should have to pay a percentage of it to that person or his heirs, if you kind of copy his idea. You see, so that would make it so that you're not hindered from being creative. You can still steal other people's ideas and put a twist on them or whatever, but you're still making money for yourself. But you do have to pay a percentage now to the guy who you ripped off, right? But the guy still has the copyright, and the copyright lasts forever, and now his heirs are just getting richer and richer and richer. You know what I mean? And so his genes are getting passed on more and more and more. This is how it should be, right? This is from a eugenics perspective, but also kind of from a fairness perspective as well, right? It's retarded. It's unfair. It's straight up unfair to have something that's brilliant but unrecognized get popular 100 years later, after the person who created that stuff is already dead, and probably after or almost after the copyright is expired as well. So now the guy's descendants cannot make any money off of his brilliance. So they cannot have a lot of kids and then pass on the genes, and then those people making art, and then have those people, those descendants that would have been, they should be getting that money, and then having kids, and then those kids, or grandkids, or great-great-grandkids, making art that'll be popular 100 years after they die, and so forth, right? But if you have a freemium system, then people can more easily make enough money to where they can have a kid or two, and can still put all their passion, or whatever it is that they're passionate about, into, they put all their passion into whatever it is they're passionate about. And then they create good work. The best work is always created by people who are passionate about what they're doing. Then those good genes can get passed down. And then if much later on, maybe after the creator's death, those things that he created begin to be appreciated in a way that they never were during his lifetime, and those things that start making a lot of money, then his descendants get that money, and then his descendants can therefore breed a lot more, and then their talented kids can create more good stuff with that money, and or also stay on the freemium system and just live in a barracks and eat basic boring food and spend most of their free time working on what they're passionate about, whether that's sculpture or painting or writing or coding or whatever else, right? And by the way, a freemium system is far closer to how life used to be. Back when there was free food, you just shoot a deer or pick a mango off a tree. If we had a freemium system, people could make whatever they want, work on whatever projects they want. Not just art, but other things. Inventions, code, whatever. And then they could create things that would make a lot of money, and then that money would be passed down to their descendants, and then their grandson or great-grandson or great-great-grandson would get rich because finally the money starts flowing in from his great-great-grandfather's work. Once it finally gets recognized and gets popular and becomes useful or whatever. And so, this would happen, and then those genes would be passed on, and then he would have a lot of kids, right? Assuming the original guy had any kids at all. But, being on a freemium system, he would not have to work nearly as hard to get enough money to have kids. Or maybe everyone's allowed to have 2 free kids when they're on the freemium system, but more kids than that, and you have to pay for the kids yourself. Only 2 kids are allowed to live off the freemium system, getting free clothes, for the kids, free food for the kids, etc. So yeah, then the grandson would get rich, and then he'd be able to have a lot of kids, thus increasing the prevalence of those great genes. And then those descendants would create a lot more great things, just like their grandfather did. And then those inventions or art or code would change the world for the better, making it so that a lot of people don't procreate, which is what we do today. What we do today, making it so that a lot of people don't procreate, this is a bad thing, right? It means less genetic diversity, and it means a short-sightedness as well. Like how the financial system deals with jacking the stock price up, financialization. It's very, very short-sighted. The companies don't invest much in R&D for the long term. They just focus on doing whatever it takes to get the stock price up. It's ridiculous. Well, similarly, we just create the art that is going to sell today. We don't create the art that's high quality, that will be around in 100 years. And this is a bad thing. But if we had a freemium system, everybody got free food, free shelter, free clothing, and free medicine, this would mean that people could create whatever they want to in terms of art or whatever. And I think a lot of art would be created that would be way, way better. And even if you want to look at it really cynically, like, well, the corporations would just steal the good art that the poor people are making, then they just repackage it, and they sell it back to the people. Yeah, well, then the crappy art being put out by the corporations would be a lot better, at least. And then there'd be much better art for people to go see, because they'd basically be ripping off the story of the poor person, and then the poor person would get a cut, right? Because he'd have a claim automatically. He could sue, and then he'd get a portion of the money brought in by the movie or whatever that ripped off his story idea, But under anarcho-capitalism, there might not be any suing, but, if the corporations are ripping off the little people all the time, then the common people would unite and to start killing the CEOs of movie studios that steal the story ideas of average people without giving them a cut of the gross of the movie. Then CEOs would always start cutting in the guy who they're ripping off. And just to save their lives, And if the studio does a terrible job and fucks the idea up, the one that they stole, then the average person can make his own movie about that story idea of his. And it can be much better. And it can make a lot more money. Right? And if the studio does a great job and the movie makes a ton of money, then that percentage that the little guy was given to the movie, even if it was only 1 or 2 points on the movie, 1 or 2 percentage points, then he would end up making a lot of money, right? Like 1% of $1 billion movie, that's $10 million, right? And then that little guy who came up with the initial idea, that wrote the novel that the movie ripped off, that little guy would become rich. You know what I mean? So, it's just like, I don't get why this doesn't happen. I mean, tyranny, I guess, but I really don't see why this can't happen in the future. I'm talking about in the future when there's no government and corporations are forced to give the little people. In the future, it's going to be the case where people can use violence against the elites if the elites steal from them unfairly, and don't recompense them or whatever, by giving a percentage of the money that the movie makes, Although it doesn't have to be a movie, if a hit novel is written based on an idea put forward in a short story that you wrote before the novel was even started, then they would give you a cut of the novel's profits, and then you'd profit even though they ripped you off. And then even though people would be getting ripped off all the time, they wouldn't even care, because they're getting a percentage of, the thing that was created by ripping them off, right? And then everything would be put on blockchains as well. And then everything would be publicly available. And if you created a story and made it publicly available and it's on the blockchain as to when it was created, and you can then easily prove that the story was created before the people who ripped it off created their story, then the person who had the idea first doesn't have to prove that his idea was ripped off. It'd just be assumed by everyone that his idea was ripped off because he put it out first. And then everyone is going to demand that whoever had the idea first be compensated. And so everyone will be constantly creating new things, and then those idea creators will be compensated. But of course, this all assumes we have the balls to create anarcho-capitalism, so that we'll have the power to use violence to force the elites to compensate us like this. So them compensating us becomes the norm, and becomes just the price of them doing business. And then we are benefiting from our good ideas, and the rich people who make the movies or put out the books or whatever, those people at the top are benefiting as well. then everyone prospers. Expensive art is better, the corporations get rich, the common people who come up with great ideas get rich, and this will incentivize people to be very creative because their creativity will be compensated. And will also incentivize them to share their great ideas instead of hogging them and keeping them a secret like people do today, because they have this great idea but they don't want to tell their boss or anybody else because they know it'll just get ripped off, and then their boss will claim that it was his idea and he won't even get a promotion, much less a percentage of the profits that arise because of that idea. So tons of great ideas are being kept to themselves, but people are keeping tons of great ideas to themselves because they know their idea will be ripped off. So if you have a society like the one I'm proposing here, it's actually going to result in way more ideas coming to light, and then things improving not just in the art realm, but in all kinds of technological ways as well. Because everybody will be getting a cut whenever the idea is there. So just put it on a blockchain, and then everybody will assume that it was his idea, and then if someone does that idea, they'll be like, hey, you ripped this guy off. And they're like, no, I came up with it myself. It'll be like, no, you didn't. We're not gonna trust that you did. You better cut that guy in, or fuck you, we're gonna kill you. You know what I mean? Like, that would be way better, and technology would progress much faster because everyone would be, putting out their ideas as much as they have them. You know what I mean? In every way, ideas for better technology, ideas for story ideas, whatever. Everything would get better. Not that people would be coming up with more better ideas, but just because the good ideas that are being come up with today are not being shared. But under such a system as I'm talking about here, those ideas would be being shared, and then everybody would benefit. When you have a freemium system and people are able to write the stories that they want to write, this is a good thing, right? Because when you have people writing to make money, they are often writing in a way that they're not passionate about. And so those stories are kind of dead. They're sort of, they're very like, you can see the sort of, surgery that's being done on the story, and how it's sort of written sort of cynically and as a way to try to appeal to a certain audience. And oh, don't use those more advanced words because, this is aimed at, junior high people or high schoolers, and they're not going to understand those words. So, you got to dumb it down for them. And oh yeah, don't do that. That's a little too risque for this audience. You can't write that. You see what I'm saying? Like, when you do all that crap, it blunts the force of the story, and it's just not a good thing, But like, the really true artists under such a system as like this, they would just sit on the freemium system and not. They would not, try to work some outside job. They just sit on the freemium system because they believe in their story so much, and they just write. And then even if their stories sucked, there would be something about those stories that would have a certain life, a certain force, a certain power that would make that story sort of compelling, even if it was totally unsellable. And then someone else will read that story and be like, this story absolutely sucks. This guy has no imagination. This guy, he doesn't know how to use words. He doesn't know how to pace. He doesn't know story structure. He doesn't know anything. But there's a certain quality to this part of the story, this one character, or this one feeling that the story conveys, or whatever. And I can take that, and I can write a story with that same type of thing, where I can rewrite his story with totally different words, but still retaining that spirit of it. And then I can make a really good novel out of this piece of shit novel that this guy felt really passionate about that he was writing, even though it sucks, right? And then, so even like shitty stories can actually inspire really good stories. So, and this is not just true in novels, this is true in sculpture and technology and all kinds of other things. Like, if you create something that's shitty, that doesn't mean it won't inspire something that's way, way, way better. And so that shitty thing actually served a very important purpose, you see? So this is another benefit to having a freemium system, because people are only going to do what they're passionate about. And doing what they're passionate about means that the quality is going to be much, much higher than if they're cynically just trying to make a living by trying to appeal to an audience. Right? Like, when people try to appeal to an audience in that way and make a living, they write stuff that never lasts. That stuff doesn't sell 100 years later because it has no soul. Those stories have no soul. And so they just don't last, But if you want something to last, you're going to be like H.P. Lovecraft, and you're writing not for the money, but you're writing because you believe in these stories, you know what I mean? They have meaning to you. Like, even if you're a materialist like H.P. Lovecraft was, these stories have meaning to you. They're important to you. And so you just care about the story. And so you write, what you believe in, what you're passionate about. And so because of that, those stories have a certain life, a certain spirit, whether it's a spirit of like, fear, like eeriness, or whether it's the spirit of like, love or whatever the thing is. It has a certain soul, the story does, and then that thing is what makes the story appealing down through the centuries. People are probably going to still be reading H.P. Lovecraft 100 years from now, because his stories have life. And they don't just have life because he's talented, they have life because he was not writing to be commercial. A lot of those people back then, they sold way, way better than him. You know what I mean? Like, read Fritz Leiber. I read a story by Fritz Leiber, and I was blown away by how talented he was. But then by the time I got to the end, I felt like he'd kind of ripped me off. Like, the ending was not that good, and I felt, you know what, this guy's just a guy who's really good at kind of like stringing you along, kind of like knowing how to manipulate the audience perfectly so you think he's amazing while you're reading the story, but then afterward you're just like, you feel like you ate a bunch of candy for dinner. You still feel empty. You know what I mean? That's like, tons of people who write for money are like that. Almost everybody who writes for money is like that. You know, and the people who don't write for money, who write because they love what they're writing, those people's stories are way, way fucking better. And that's why those people make no money when they're alive, but, you know, those people stand a much better chance after their death of becoming much, much more popular. You see, so letting people be on a freemium system or write what they want to write, or you know, sculpt what they want to sculpt, paint what they want to paint, code what they want to code, that is the way to have truly high quality stuff, because people are only going to spend their time doing what they really believe in, because time is a resource you can never buy back. You know what I mean? So that's how it is. You know, and I think this is really important to understand. Right? This has been Redshift. I hope someone understood what I was saying in this video. Peace trucks for thieves who don't compensate who they steal from.